Welcome back. I'm Roy with Rugged Badger Racing and Team Parts Badger. This is our Ecotec swapped ChampCar Miata, and I have my fire extinguisher today because I'm about to get flamed. We're going to talk about budgets, which is a very sensitive topic for some people. I, for one, I love transparency. I love sharing information, whether it's budgets and what it costs, what I'm learning on the track. I think it helps the community overall. So let's dive into how much it costs to get this thing together, get it on the track, and also what I think it would cost if you were on a shoestring budget to start racing with a car like this. Now, a few months ago, it all started right here when we got our used Ecotec swap Miata that had a blown motor. And I gone through all of the parts that were on this car when we got it, and I did a rundown on what it would have cost to build this car as we received it and started this project a few months ago. So, diving right in, the car itself, I think you could get a donor maybe around $3,500. Maybe you can find something with a blown motor. I think that's fair. To cage one of these, which has already had a cage in it, about $2,500 bucks. The hardtop, it did come with a hardtop. Now, we put a different one on, one that we had, but it's the same hardtop. I didn't know that until we swapped over. It needed a rear window, but it came with a rear window. That's $1,000 bucks. The fire system in this car, about $600 bucks. The belts were about $200. Figure about $600 bucks for the seats. Let's see here. We have a window net. A window net's about $70 bucks. The shocks and springs, which are fat cats on this car, you could get those for about $1,300 bucks for the set. About $600 on wheels for these Sparco wheels. They're about $150 a piece. I'm not counting anything for the tires. The sway bar, about $200 bucks for the front sway bar, which we took off anyway. The bushings were probably about $600 bucks for urethane bushings. We swapped those out for Delrin anyway. It did have a Willwood proportioning valve. That's $150 bucks. The steering wheel with the adapter is actually pretty nice in this. I'm thinking about $400 bucks for that. It has a cool shirt system, which is a DIY cool shirt system. I still think that's going to cost about $400 bucks. That's what we spent on our own when we DIY'd it. It has an AIM MXS 1.2. Now, this thing is awesome. It is very cool, but it's pricey. I have in here $2,600 bucks for that. I'm sure it costs more for the additional sensors. It has an AIM Smarty Cam. It has one generation older than the newest. That's $1,900 bucks, and that thing is also awesome. It has a Motorola radio and the cable assemblies in there. That's $1,700 bucks. It has the Ecotec. The Ecotec swap kit that's in this, if you are to buy the entire kit, you're looking at $2,900. Now, you can go piece by piece for the ChampCar rules because a swap has a standard $2,500. So flywheels are free, wiring harnesses are free, ECUs are free, so we're not going to include that in the ChampCar data. But if you're to buy all that, $2,900 for the kit, $900 for the harness, $185 for the ECU. The header is a 1320 Polaris header. That was $300 bucks. Figure about $400 bucks total to complete the additional exhaust from the downpipe all the way back. It has a 9 Lives Racing wing. That's $850. It had a 9 Lives Racing splitter. That's $770 for the splitter and Airdam. It has an Odyssey battery at $150. Figure random electrical. It has a fuse box. It has a cutoff switch. I'm going to lowball it at $400 bucks. I'm sure it was more. It has a rear tray in the car, so all this bent sheet metal on the rear tray, $300 bucks, not really needed, but they put it in. It has a sump. I figure about $400 bucks for the sump and the plumbing for that, and it also has a remote oil filter assembly. Figure $300 bucks for that. So in total, to build this car, I think it would cost about $26,000. $26,175 to be exact, to build this thing as we received it. Now, it did have a blown motor when we got it, but I didn't include the cost of the motor in that. So to get this car, if we were to build this fresh, you're looking at a pretty big sum of money. All right, so to build this thing, pretty expensive at 26 grand. That's not what we paid. We paid $7,000 for this car. It was a hell of a deal. I know other people were looking for it online and other people wanted to pull the trigger. So I'm really happy we were able to get this car, especially with all the electronics and the goodies. I've always wanted that and I've never popped for it price-wise to get the really nice stuff. I'm glad this car has it. So we paid $7 grand. It cost us another $950 to get the car here. Now, you could do that cheaper if you drove down to Texas and trailered it. We paid a company $950 bucks to get it here. Now, registration. I did want to drive this on the street, so I'm including $475 to retitle this car and get it registered. I did write down the actual amount we paid for the car, and I did actually pay those state taxes. That is important because they are verifying. You don't want to commit fraud on that stuff. So that's why it was a little bit more expensive. So all in for the car for us, we're at $8,425. Now, when we got this car, we did a lot to it. So I have quite a list here. Now for brakes, we completely swapped out the brakes. Figure $1,300 for brakes, not including pads. That's the 11.75-inch front kit. We also have a Dyna Pro single, a kit that we actually made for the rear of the car. So brake rotors, all the brackets, all the extra calipers and things like that, $1,300. Now, related to the transmission, we are using a brand new Mazda transmission. We get that from Mazda Motorsports with a discount, shipped $1,737. The engine, including all of the extra stuff that came with it, logistics, everything there, you're looking at $1,923. Now, the core itself, it wasn't that expensive, but all in, that's what it is. The oil pan, we have $1,188 on the oil pan. We are selling those on the website. We have prototype versions, and then we'll have final versions after we go through more testing. Suspension, hubs, steering. Now I'm including all of that together. That's Delrin bushings, that's Penske's up front, that's replacing the shocks in the rear. I got hubs, I got a steering rack, I got the subframe, everything that we needed to replace. This is a whopper at $4,518. That's how much it costs for everything here. Now I will say, to run stock springs in the back, with all of the different types of springs we had to buy and shocks and things like that, it was substantially more expensive than just buying the Penske's. So I don't know if that rule is designed to save money. It certainly did not. And then used wheels. So for wheels, we're able to use the wheels left over from the Parts Badger car. I got $1,000 for all the wheels that we're using there. If you had bought them used, figure $100 a pop, $75 a pop, something like that. Now, all of the odds and ends, you're looking at $933. And that puts us at a total of $21,024 for us to get this car upgraded like we wanted it. Now, we did reuse the splitter. I'm not including anything for that. Obviously, we're reusing the wing that was on the car, nothing for the hard top. But for us to get this car as it sits, you're looking at 21 grand. And that's assuming we saved the $19,000 it would have been if we built this up from scratch. So right now we're sitting at the 2124. All right, let's talk about our spares. We have our spare engine here. This is the MWR Motorworks engine, which frankly we're probably not going to use. There's some issues with that build. We also have a secondary used Mazda transmission. And then if you saw the trailer video, which is actually not unloaded yet, we still have tons of spares out there in the trailer. So in total, engine was $3,200. Transmission, another $1,737 for a spare brand new Mazda transmission. All the swap stuff, we actually have spare stuff. We haven't received that yet, but we ordered it from Ecotec Miata. We're looking at roughly $1,200, an extra spare Ecotec swap stuff just in case something goes bad at the track. Plus, we can prep a spare drivetrain assembly for a quicker swap. I do not want to be doing like an 8 to 12 hour swap after a Saturday race to get this thing running on Sunday. So hopefully we can pre-prep some of that in the future. Now brakes, fueling stuff, suspension, all of the spares related to that. Again, this adds up to a lot. That's $3,313. So when you look at all our spares put together, we're looking at $9,443. All right, let's talk about consumables. In particular, tires. Tires are definitely a big one. We're running the Nankang tires. So when we take those into account, we got 8 tires to have those delivered. 4 of them were heat cycled from Tire Rack. We're looking at $2,154 just for the tires. You add in fluids, we have almost $600 in fluids. That's water wetter, that's Redline MTL, that's Redline 7W90 or 75W90 for the differential. That's oil, got a lot of oil in there as well. We have SRF brake fluid for our clutch assembly, and we have Motul 600 for our braking. So all in, all those fluids were $600. Brakes, so all the brake pads and rotors, I actually didn't include that in the initial brake estimate. You're looking at $802. So consumables, things that are going to wear down, and just to get our entire stock of that, you're looking at $3,553. All right, so let's talk about radios. So we had the really nice radio dash in here. We actually had to reposition that because we had a broken antenna. Now it included what I thought was going to be the more expensive part. but we had to get headsets and we had to get crew radios because our Bowfang set doesn't work with the Motorola. You're looking at $2,080. So in total, the complete radio system for this thing, if we were to buy that radio in the car, the antenna, things like that, I think you're looking at about $4,000. It is really expensive. The Bowfang stuff, I think I spent maybe $500, but I had problems all the time. This Motorola setup is way better, but boy, is it expensive. All right, so we have our car, we have our spares, we have our consumables. Now, how much did the actual event cost for us to run at Gingerman? So I have registration for the event, including a couple ChampCar memberships. You're looking at $1,300. It's actually one of the cheapest things of this entire racing experience is the actual registration to the events. Now we rented an RV, and I like that because it gives us another option. Now normally we tow with the RV, we didn't this time, but let's say something went wrong with the truck, we could always tow. I really like having this home base, especially with quiet hours and things like that. You can go sit in the RV and relax and debrief as a team. It's really easy to keep everything charging. And it's about the same price as a hotel for the whole team. So we ended up with $2,157 for the RV for this trip, all in. Moving on, so for fuel, you're talking about, $1,150, I think the event cost. We spent $953 on fuel, and we didn't even finish. If we ran the entire race, we would have to go again. I think we would spend maybe another $300 on top of that in fuel. So the fuel costs almost as much as the event registration. We also registered for the test day. We actually did 2 registrations. I'm only including one in that. So that's $225. Now, let's talk about the consumables, right? So I have the consumable line item for tires and brakes and things like that. In total, I believe we used about 40% of our consumables. So when we take in the consumable portion of that budget, you're looking at another $1,421. So the total to run the Gingerman event for our team was $6,026. That's actually a lot less than I thought it would be. Now, the further races and the other prep that we do, they do get a lot more expensive than that when you're towing across the country. But I think overall that's fairly reasonable, especially running a hot tire. Now, if we were to run the RS4s or something like that, if we were to run maybe cheaper brake fluid, cheaper brake pads, things like that, that budget could go down quite a bit. All right, so if you watch the other video, you know that we actually didn't make it through the event because we have a motor issue. So assuming this motor's blown, which I think we have a bent valve, and that has to come out, $6,026 wasn't our actual event cost. We still have to put a new motor in this thing. That brings us to $7,609. So $7,600 to run one of the lower cost events. It's a lot closer for us. Obviously, the price gets up there, plus it killed our weekend. Not only did we have issues on Saturday, but this motor going on Sunday, we lost track time. You don't want that happening. You want the car to stay together because not only does it crank up your budget, it reduces the amount of time you have on the track. All right, so what is the actual total that we spent to get this thing together, to get it to Gingerman, run our first race, and then get this thing back here? Went through a lot of numbers. Grand total is $41,410. Now, that isn't actual cash out the door because we were able to reuse some parts from the other Parts Badger car, like wheels, the front shocks. When we replaced the subframe, we already had that. I included basically fair market use values for those items to get to the $41,000. Actual cash out the door on the credit card, we were looking at $36,773. All in, everything I talked about as far as consumables, spares. Now, some of that stuff moves on. Obviously, the car and the condition that's in, that moves on to the next event. Got to put a new motor in. We still have about 60% of consumables left and things like that. So that's not completely wasted. Nonetheless, it's a pretty big bill. Now, it gets even bigger if you include labor. So I spent about 141 hours. The team actually spent a little bit more than that. But I'm just gonna say if we had a mechanic, we paid him $100 an hour to actually perform this work. All in, we're looking at $55,510 to get this car to where it is today, right? Everything we did with this to get it to the event, to get it back. Now, I don't necessarily know whether or not that budget is typical for teams. I think we spend a little bit more, especially with the new transmissions and things like that. But now we'll talk a little bit about what you could do on a shoestring budget. All right, so this is a budget series. This is supposed to be cheap, and it certainly can be cheap. Let me walk you through what I think a shoestring budget would cost. Now, we got a smoking deal on this car. $7 grand for roughly a $26,000 build. Probably was a lot more than that because I'm probably missing a lot of stuff there. I recommend buying used if you're a budget team because that other team that prepped the car, I guarantee spent way more money than you are gonna pay for that car. So let's say $7,000 to get this car. We paid $950 to ship it. If you go down there yourself, you're looking at maybe $500. Get this car down, head down to Texas, back, fuel, maybe a hotel, not too bad. Now brakes, we put all new brakes on this car and big brake kits. You don't need that. It had stock brakes plus stock pads, and it had spare pads as well. Figure $300 for a couple spare calipers. Not a whole lot of money there. Now the engine, we spent a lot on a really nice low mile engine on eBay. You don't have to do that. They're out there cheap. Plus you can get new timing chain pretty cheap, new water pump chain. Figure $556 for that, plus all those additional spare gaskets and things you need there. Not bad at all. Now the event itself to register plus a couple ChampCar memberships, you're looking at $1,150. Also not bad, but fuel is going to be a pretty big expense. You are going to be looking at $1,071 on fuel to run that event. I really don't think there's any way around that. It's going to be expensive. The car burns fuel. Your tow vehicle is going to burn fuel. Fluids, you can save a lot of money on fluids. I think we budgeted somewhere in the $600 range. That's what we spent. Maybe 600, maybe even 800. I forget what. You don't need all those exotic fluids. You could probably get away under $200. I have 173 dedicated to that. Tires, it came with RS4s. Run the RS4s. It'll be fine. That will probably hurt your time. When we look at a budget difference, on the shoestring budget, you can run almost as fast as us. Spending way more on a shoestring except for those tires. I think the Nankings were probably 2 seconds a lap faster than the RS4s. I'll get into more on that a little bit later. So to round out, we have a couple spares for suspension, things like that, a few $100. I think you can get this exact car in almost the same condition it sits today, reusing some of the parts that came in the car, not getting a new transmission, just using the one that's there, little bit cheaper motor, not swapping out the suspension, just getting this thing points legal again. You're only looking at $11,353. All right, so you can do exactly what we did with this car and get it to the track for $11,000. Why on earth would we spend the equivalent of $41,000 or actually cash out the door just south of $37,000? So most of those things don't actually impact the time on the track and what this car is actually going to be able to perform, with one exception, and that exception is tires. This is something ChampCar definitely has to work on because I can spend $2,000 on a set of tires and I can go 2 seconds faster than an RS14. That's not fair. That's something I think the series really has to fix. But if you want to compete and you can open your wallet, that's what's going to happen. So hopefully ChampCar can come up with some rules and start controlling tires. I think everybody wants some sort of control, but if you have 5 proposals, right, you're going to split. 80% want something done, but they want different things. ChampCar has to pick something and control those costs. So enough with that ranting. The rest of the expenses are largely due to convenience and having the spares. I like having an RV at the track. It's really enjoyable for me to be able to go in and relax, get a cold soda, get some chips, things like that. Now, when I was a kid in racing, I actually bought a conversion van for $600, and that's what I used. And I had a roughly equivalent experience on a budget. Maybe that's something you can do. Now I just spend the money, and I rent it too because I don't want to worry about maintenance or anything like that on the RV. Now, I have over $3,500 in transmissions. We have a brand new one in the car and a brand new one as a spare. You do not need to do that. The only reason I do that is because I do not want any of the potential reliability issues that might relate to that. I'm trying to buy insurance effectively, and ideally, I don't want to be taking this drivetrain in and out of the car. Ironically, I've already done that like 4 times, and I'm going to have to do it again. Nonetheless, that's what I want to avoid. And I have a lot of other spares. I really don't want to be scrambling at the track. And if you've been in a track with us and you're a Miata team and you needed something, you probably came by. We probably had that part. You saw all those bins that we had. We have a ton of spares. We have roughly $10,000 that we spent on spares in addition to all the spares that we had from the other car, because we already had everything related to the chassis, suspension, things like that. A lot of these new spares are related to the Ecotec motor and related to everything we needed to do to get Ecotec type spares available on track. That is a huge expense for us. We also expensed, I mean, obviously I went big on the brakes. You don't have to do that. You're gonna run an equivalent time with the stock brakes. We talked about that. It's really just the consumable expense. And then even the consumable of stock isn't too bad, but it's the reliability of the calipers, which I hate. So I'm trying to stay on the track as long as possible. Again, ironically, because we had such a horrible Saturday and Sunday at the last race. So overall, you can really save a ton of money. It's not really going to impact your time. And I think ChampCar did a great job on all of that, except for the tires. So I'm going to leave the video at that. I'm going to do another video on what it takes to race as inexpensively as possible. Because yes, you could do this for 11 grand, split between 4 people and then owning this car. That's not bad. You can make that happen, but there's actually cheaper ways to race too. And I'm going to do another video to talk about that. And ChampCar is doing a phenomenal job allowing people to race very inexpensively. You don't even have to spend the 11 grand or the 11 grand divided by 4. You can do it even less than that. I think when I started in ChampCar, I was renting seats. I think it was $800 a weekend. So more on that later. Please remember to like and subscribe below. A lot more content coming, and I appreciate everybody for watching.